We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me?
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Good morning and welcome to CBS News Mornings. It's 7 o'clock here in New York City. I'm Anne-Marie Green. Here's a look at the stories grabbing our attention right now. Today, the Biden administration is marking a grim milestone of 1 million lives lost to COVID as the president prepares for the launch of the global COVID-19 summit. So Nancy Cordes reports on the ongoing debate over pandemic response. This morning, we're getting a closer look at a fast-moving wildfire along the Los Angeles coast. It is swallowing up multi-million-dollar homes and forcing families to flee. And civilian evacuations have stalled in Mariupol this morning as fighting in eastern Ukraine intensifies. Deborah Pata catches us up on the overnight developments on the front lines. And how's your savings account looking these days? Apparently, the U.S. personal savings rate dropped to its lowest level in nearly a decade. In Money Watch, we're going to check in with finance insiders about what prompted the big dip. Plus, nearly a year after the deadly high-rise condo collapse in Surfside, Florida, we're going to break down details of a new settlement reached for victims and families.
The justice? No. Justice would be that building is still standing and those people are still going to soccer games.
Indeed. Well, we're going to tell you who has to pay and what it could mean for future criminal charges. Starting things off this morning with some breaking news on the pandemic. It's not good news. Today, the White House will mark 1 million lives lost to COVID. President Biden is expected to deliver pre-recorded remarks on the administration's response to the virus as cases rise nationwide. Top healthcare officials warn of another deadly surge as a new Omicron variant rapidly spreads. And this comes as the president urges Congress to pass more coronavirus funding. He'll host a virtual COVID summit later on today where he's expected to urge world leaders to invest more money into vaccines and testing. And of course, we will have full coverage of President Biden's speech later on this morning. You can stream his remarks live around 9 a.m. Eastern right here on CBS News. To that massive wildfire now in Southern California. It has triggered mandatory evacuations across Orange County. The so-called coastal fire has burned about 200 acres and destroyed dozens of homes since erupting yesterday. Dina Demetrius is there following the very latest for us. Dina, good morning.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Yes, at least 24 homes have been destroyed here, and some are still smoldering. Now, firefighters have been going into homes that are still standing, checking out attics, looking at the interiors and looking at the roofs to see if there are embers there that may turn into flames later on. Multi-million-dollar mansions and other homes went up in flames Wednesday. High winds and dry terrain fueling a wildfire in Southern California. Fire crews on the ground went house to house trying to contain the blaze. From the sky, planes dropped retardant in hopes of stopping the spread.
We have helitankers and we've got ground crews and we have every fire engine available in the area to come and put this fire out.
Laguna Niguel resident Brianna Kavinsky couldn't get to her home to rescue her pets.
I guess we'll wait here because I'm afraid to go further.
But firefighters came through, delivering Brianna's cat back to her.
I know they have huge things to deal with right now, so it was very thoughtful for them to save my animal.
Local officials here in Orange County say the drought brought on by climate change is making conditions worse.
The fuels beds in this county, throughout Southern California, throughout the West, are so dry that, fire like this is going to be more commonplace.
Orange County Fire Authority Chief Brian Fennessy says 5 years ago, this blaze would have been more easily contained.
The winds we experience today are not unusual. These were not Santa Ana winds. These are coastal winds that we experience generally every day.
Officials haven't said how the fire began. Now, property damage assessment teams expect to start their work later today. Anne Marie?
Dina, thank you very much. Well, the war in Ukraine is one of many factors driving up prices across the board here in the U.S. And now economists are warning that unless the Biden administration moves fast, we could see high inflation through next year. Carter Evans has the latest on that.
At a family farm in Illinois, the president blamed the war in Ukraine for tightening grain supplies, driving up global food prices.
Putin's war has cut off critical sources of food.
In the grocery store, prices for meats, poultry, fish, and eggs are up more than 14% from a year ago. Citrus fruit almost 19%, even though the overall inflation rate slowed slightly.
It's easy to say that this is the peak, but that's a little like saying the peak of winter was in January. There's still a lot of snow that needs shoveled in February and March.
Greg McBride, chief financial analyst at Bankrate.com, says the more than 5% increase in shelter and housing costs in April is probably underestimated.
The reality of it is any tenant that has renewed a lease in recent months, they've likely seen a much bigger than 5% increase in rent.
It's one of the best air fryers in the market.
Bobby Javahari can help explain the nearly 8% jump in prices for household appliances. His air fryers and pressure cookers are made in China.
January 1st, we raised prices.
How much?
Close to 10%.
He says continued COVID lockdowns in China are slowing production and shipping costs are still sky high.
When it usually should cost $2,000 to $3,000 for a container to come to the Long Beach port, it's now costing $12,000, $14,000, $15,000.
And the war in Ukraine is also driving up oil prices.
You need oil to make plastic, and you need plastic to make air fryers. The costs of air fryers have gone up 5% because of volatility in oil prices. Retail prices are going to keep going higher.
But at some point, people won't be able to afford that.
Yeah, I agree.
A lot of this inflation that we're experiencing is rooted on the supply side rather than the demand side. The Federal Reserve raising interest rates to slow the economy, that'll address the demand side, but it won't fix the supply chain. It won't broker peace in Eastern Europe, and it won't open the ports in China.
Well, NATO appears to be on the verge of expanding right onto the doorstep of Russia. Finland's top leaders called on Parliament and senior political officials to approve the application for membership amid growing public support, despite warnings from Moscow. And Sweden is also expected to follow suit. Meantime, in Ukraine, Russia's advance stalled across several key cities. As Deborah Patta reports, Ukrainian troops are on the counteroffensive, taking back towns across the north and the east.
It's a game of cat and mouse. Danger never far away. Village by village, Ukrainian soldiers are pushing Russian troops away from Kharkiv and back towards the Russian border. In their wake, a trail of death and destruction. And a bittersweet victory for those coming home. The fighting has not let up in the south and the east. Even in Mariupol, the Russians do not have full control, thwarted by a Ukrainian regiment who remain barricaded in that steel plant. Injured, close to starving, the soldiers release these haunting images. Many have amputated limbs, doctors forced to operate without proper supplies. For loved ones on the outside, the weight is unbearable.
Well, it is a big day at the White House today. Not only is the Global COVID Summit about to begin, but there's another high-stakes summit happening tonight. Coming up, we're going to take a closer look at the administration's strategy in Southeast Asia as leaders from Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and other countries in the region hold major talks. And we're going to take you to a town in Texas where people are dealing with the nation's highest inflation rate. Just to give you an idea how bad it is. People there are paying $6 for a gallon of milk. Yeah, we'll be right back after the break.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It's gonna be big!
The metaverse, the virtual world that's become a cryptocurrency casino.
It's like buying property on Mars.
Do they get an actual picture of this? No, it's a digital copy. Why would they pay for that?
Making millionaires almost overnight.
We made more than $1 million in crypto last year.
I have no idea how much money I have made over the past year. That's like,
wow! Big rewards.
There's gold in them, there are hills, as they say.
Bigger risks.
The market's down, but it's gonna bounce back.
It's crypto.
Is it a gold rush or fool's gold?
It's our metaverse, our story. Peace out, y'all.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Stream now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
This week on 60 Minutes, that's incredible.
The 60 Minutes.
60 Minutes. 60 Minutes.
Are you ready for some tough questions?
Let me ask you this.
You know how this sounds.
What's your response to that?
60 Minutes Sundays on CBS.
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
Let's get the forecast from our partners at the Weather Channel.
Here we are in our virtual view.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battering rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
This is our virtual view, what it actually looks like. Those are some of the best graphics I've seen.
Spare no expense, Gail.
We experience the weather in a whole new way.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
The time now is 6:11 in Chicago. You know, activists and authorities are calling for action in the Windy City after 3 mass shootings in just 24 hours and more than 20 people shot since Tuesday as violence among gangs escalate. Bound to be a big story. It is 7:12 now in New York City. CBS News Mornings is back with a look at some of the stories that you may have missed while you were offline. North Korea is entering a strict nationwide lockdown after reporting what it says are its first ever COVID cases. According to state media, there's been an outbreak in Pyongyang. The government has relied on strict border controls to contain the virus and has no vaccine program. Nearly 108,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2021. That's according to the CDC predictions based on early data. Now, it would be the highest number of overdose deaths ever recorded in a year. And most of those deaths were linked to opioids like fentanyl. A federal appeals court is allowing a Texas law governing social media content moderation to go into effect. The legislation allows people to sue tech platforms if their posts are blocked or removed. A lower court had ruled that the measure harms the company's First Amendment rights. More stunning details have surfaced about the fugitive couple from Alabama who spent 11 days on the run before authorities caught up with them in Indiana earlier this week. Officials released new information about the apparent jailhouse romance and former corrections officer Vicky White's final words. Janet Shamlian has more on the couple's time on the run.
This is video of Casey White in shackles and handcuffs, leaving his arraignment in Alabama, where he faced new charges.
Casey wasn't worth it.
We're hearing some of the last words of the woman who helped him, former corrections officer Vicky White, recorded during a 911 call during the chase that led to their capture. Vicky White telling Casey White they should make a run for it.
Airbags are going off. Let's get out, run. Get us back to the hotel.
Soon after the chase ended, authorities say Vicky White turned the gun on herself.
Okay, I'm gonna go for the gun.
This is body cam video of a deputy taking the gun from her hand, then pulling her from the car.
Somebody pull me. Ready?
She died a short time later at an Evansville, Indiana hospital. The coroner's office confirming she shot herself. The duo was on the run for 11 days, armed with a cache of weapons and plenty of cash. Authorities are calling the escape well planned from a relationship dating back 2 years, and that Casey White had taken legal steps to get transferred back from a state prison to the jail where Vicky White worked. They'd been in Evansville about a week, evading authorities by buying and ditching multiple vehicles. Police believe Vicky and Casey White were headed out of town when the chase started that ended a nationwide manhunt. Janet Shamlian, CBS News, Houston.
These Supreme Court justices are set to hold a closed-door conference today. It's their first meeting since the leak of a draft majority opinion indicated that the High Court may overturn Roe v. Wade. Yesterday, Senate Democrats failed to advance a bill to protect abortion rights. So Scott McFarland is following the very latest for us and is joining us now from D.C. Good to see you this morning, Scott.
Anne-Marie, good morning to you. Congress took this largely symbolic vote on a law to codify Roe versus Wade. As expected, it failed, raising the stakes on this imminent ruling from the High Court. No twists, no turns. It went nearly straight down party lines.
The motion is not agreed to.
The Senate blocked debate on a measure writing some federal abortion rights into law, with all Republicans.
Their extreme proposal goes way beyond codifying the status quo.
And West Virginia Democrat Joe Manchin opposing.
We should not be dividing this country further than we're already divided.
Vice President Kamala Harris presided over the vote.
And this vote clearly suggests that the Senate is not where the majority of Americans are on this issue.
Inside, House Democrats crossed the Capitol chanting.
My decision.
And outside. So what do you do next?
Well, next we just start campaigning like crazy.
I think it needs to be a drumbeat.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says Democrats in his own party are not sounding the alarm loud enough leading into the midterm elections. His state of Illinois is now surrounded by 5 states that are set to restrict or completely end access to abortion if Roe v. Wade is struck down by the High Court, as anticipated.
We need to be talking about this, making sure that voters know about this from now through November, and frankly, as long as it takes.
As crowds continue to gather near some of the justices' homes, state and local law enforcement agencies are issuing awareness reports that demonstrations may become flashpoints for violence with little to no warning. The governors of Maryland and Virginia have asked the Justice Department to help provide extra security outside the homes of Supreme Court justices. In the meantime, on Saturday, abortion rights groups rally at the Washington Monument just across the street from the White House to continue to have their voices heard. Anne-Marie?
Yeah, I think they're going to be there for a while, maybe until we hear the final decision from the court. Listen, as you pointed out, Democrats knew that this law to codify Roe v. Wade was not going to pass, right? They just wanted to make sure that they had every senator on the record about where they stood. So then moving forward, how are they going to leverage the result of yesterday's vote?
Yeah, the Senate Majority Leader said he was trying to use a floodlight politically to shine a light on where everybody in the Senate stands on abortion rights, conceivably with the idea that he would promote those votes and those stances as part of the midterm electioning. At this point, this has been an election cycle that's been so very dominated by economic issues, by inflation, gas prices, grocery prices, by things that are of retail importance to Americans' budgets. There is this effort by Democrats to try to leverage this vote to return the electorate to its passion over the issue of abortion rights. There are about 5 or 6 months for them to do so, but it really hasn't moved the meter in the last week and a half since that draft opinion was released, indicating the High Court is poised to overturn Roe versus Wade. Hasn't moved the meter, according to our CBS News polling, which shows a majority of respondents said this would not make them more likely and is not likely to impact their vote. We'll see if yesterday in that long debate and that vote changed things.
Yeah, we will see. Scott, thank you very much. The women's lacrosse team from Delaware State University, a historically black institution, says Georgia police racially profiled them during a traffic stop last month. Officers pulled over their team bus last month as they traveled home from a game in Florida. Their bus was initially stopped for an alleged traffic violation, but it turned into a search for drugs.
There were roughly 5 police officers who were first Caucasian and also heavily armed. And when they came on the bus, just their tone, and it was very accusatory with how they were talking to us. It was like we were already guilty, and it was like, we're gonna find it out eventually, so just tell us.
State officials and Congress members have spoken out against the search, and the president of Delaware State University, Tony Allen, says the incident has left him incensed. Another day of severe storms moving into the Midwest with a tornado threat. We're going to bring in meteorologist Jordan Steele from our partners at the Weather Channel. How's it looking out there, Jordan?
Well, good morning, Anne-Marie. My goodness, back-to-back severe weather days yet again here along the northern tier. We are tracking severe weather, which obviously this morning it's been active, but we're going to watch what happens later in the day that could get very, very feisty in this zone. So we're going to get right to it to show you. Remember, we had all the action yesterday in the southern edge of Minnesota. A good chunk of Iowa was getting some crazy wind. We had 79-mile-per-hour wind gusts, a baseball-sized hail or tennis ball-sized hail. And so the threat is going to still be there today. We're going to back it up along the Red River, along the Dakota and Minnesota border, stretching down into parts of Nebraska and maybe even into Kansas as a line forms. So let's talk tornado first. Our Torcon value is a 4. The greater the number, the greater the risk. Our scale goes to 10. 4 definitely needs to make sure you've got all of your phones on loud so that the alerts will come through. Here's a look at how the forecast is shaping up. If we just take a look at the model here, notice all the action this morning, which is still a little feisty, might I add it, will kind of shift up along the international border. And then this is what you notice as we head into your afternoon. This line of activity that will blossom just east of North Platte and then come racing towards the Sioux up into Fargo. So tonight, evening commute, dinner time, this is the zone that we're looking at that could get very, very intense. That will all shift east and then, of course, go through the rest of the state of 10,000 lakes. And then, of course, all of that will be tracking eastward. Outside of the severe weather, we've got the heat cranking. Temperatures in the 90s, but with the heat index value in the triple digits. Little Rock, Shreveport, Wichita Falls could break records today well into the 90s, and it'll even feel like it'll be close to triple digits up along the northern tier, Anne-Marie. Remember, you could catch all-day coverage featuring our virtual view technology on the Weather Channel television network.
All right, Jordan, thank you so much. You can also get the latest on the weather in your area by using the CBS News app. It gives you access to all of our CBS News national and local streams for free, anytime, anywhere. Leaders from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations will meet with President Biden today. They're expected to discuss an array of issues, including trade and the ongoing war in Ukraine, and of course, China. To talk more about this, I want to bring in Anthony Nielsen. He is the Vice President in East Asia and Pacific Practice at the business strategy firm Albright Stonebridge Group. Thank you so much for joining us. There's a lot to talk about. We're not going to get to everything. So first off, I want to set the scene for people. Former President Trump removed the U.S. from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was a trade agreement. So where are we now in terms of the relationship that the U.S. has with the countries in this region? And what are the challenges that the Biden administration are sort of facing when it comes to rekindling the relationships?
Sure, that's a great question. So the Obama administration was extremely focused on ASEAN and pitched the TPP as the centerpiece of its economic strategy for the region. So when the Trump administration pulled out, it really left the U.S. without an economic agenda for the region. And because of political realities, the Biden administration hasn't really been able to put forward a real trade agreement component. There isn't any market access component to some of the proposals that it's made, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. So it leaves the U.S. trying to find alternatives for where it can discuss key issues with Southeast Asia, like supply chains, like digital transformation, that will find some alignment without having to go through the congressional process on free trade, which just isn't moving these days.
So here's sort of the conundrum, I would think, for the Biden administration. This is a region that wants to rekindle some of these trade agreements. They want a healthy trade relationship. China, in the meantime, has been pretty aggressive and assertive, using sort of economic diplomacy, but also militarily being aggressive in the region. What does the U.S. have to offer that will combat the growing influence that China is having in the region? Keeping in mind, we're talking about a bunch of different countries. They don't all feel the same way that the U.S. does about China.
Absolutely. There's not complete strategic alignment between the U.S. and ASEAN. However, ASEAN countries value their independence. They value their freedom of action. The association really was formed to create a counterbalance to some of the great powers, not just China and the U.S., but also India, that surround the region. So the fact that the U.S. can show commitment, can show a willingness to engage at a high level, that's really important to ASEAN. And it's something that if the Biden administration can maintain and continue to see leaders participating in some of the major ASEAN-related meetings and events that continue to have a sort of steady drumbeat of engagement, that will have a positive effect. You're never going to escape the fact that these countries are right on the border with China, that China is the largest trading partner for almost everybody. But the fact is that these countries do want the U.S. engaged in the region.
We've talked a lot about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It seems to have impacted many, many things. I'm wondering about the impact on America's focus on other things. This was somewhat unexpected, and it's part of the reason why this meeting is happening a little bit later than expected. Is the war in Ukraine going to have an impact on the type of engagement that the U.S. may have been able to have if it wasn't focused on Ukraine, if it wasn't focused on aid for Ukraine and all that sort of stuff?
So there's a long history of U.S. presidential administrations declaring that this time we're going to focus on Asia and then being drawn away by events in other parts of the world. The Biden administration is really working hard to counter that, talking about how Ukraine has some universal significance, and it's not something that ASEAN countries want to see ever replicated in Asia. Now, the view as to who is at fault and the genesis behind this invasion varies pretty heavily depending on who you talk to across the region. However, the Biden administration, I think, has done a good job of making clear to ASEAN countries, and particularly some of the partners that we work with most often in Southeast Asia, like Singapore, that this isn't something that is a distraction from overall U.S. presence. It's something that has global significance.
Anthony Nelson. Great talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, it looks like people are ditching their Pelotons and actually returning to the gym. Are you one of those people? Find out what's driving the trend despite a steady rise in COVID cases nationwide. That's coming up later on this hour. And then coming up much later on Red and Blue, we are diving into Pennsylvania's GOP Senate showdown ahead of Election Day next week. We're going to talk to candidate David McCormick's team about the high-stakes race as he faces off against other top contenders, including celebrity physician Dr. Mehmet Oz and political commentator Kathy Barnett. You can stream that conversation in our 6 p.m. Eastern hour. We'll be right back.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It's gonna be big!
The metaverse, the virtual world that's become a cryptocurrency casino.
It's like buying property on Mars.
Do they get an actual picture of this? No, it's a digital copy. Why would they pay for that?
Making millionaires almost overnight.
We made more than $1 million in crypto last year.
I have no idea how much money I have made over the past year. That's like, wow!
Big rewards.
There's gold in them, there are hills, as they say.
Bigger risks.
The market's down, but it's gonna bounce back. It's crypto.
Is it a gold rush or fool's gold?
It's our metaverse, our story. Peace out, y'all.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Stream now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
This week on 60 Minutes,
That's incredible.
The 60 Minutes.
60 minutes, 60 minutes.
Are you ready for some tough questions? Let me ask you this.
you know how this sounds.
What's your response to that?
60 Minutes Sundays on CBS.
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
Let's get the forecast from our partners at the Weather Channel. Here we are in our virtual view.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battering rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
This is our virtual view, what it actually looks like.
Those are some of the best graphics I've seen.
Spare no expense, Gail.
We experience the weather in a whole new way.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to CBS News Mornings. It is 7:30. Let's get you caught up on some of the news that you may have missed. A Democrat-led bill to codify abortion rights failed in the Senate. The final tally was 49-51, with Democrat Joe Manchin joining Republicans in a vote against the measure. More than a dozen houses and multi-million-dollar homes along the California coastline have been destroyed by a wildfire. The fast-moving coastal fire has already burned over 200 acres, forcing some Orange County families to evacuate. Luckily, no injuries have been reported, though. An Interior Department report says at least 500 Native American and Indigenous children died under the guardianship of forced American boarding schools between 1819 and 1969. The government and church-run schools have a documented history of abuse and assimilation policies. Turning back now to the COVID-19 pandemic, and today the Biden administration will mark 1 million lives lost to the deadly virus over the past 2 years. And this comes as Congress debates the country's ongoing response and major funding. Our Nancy Cordes is at the White House with more. Good morning, Nancy.
Good morning, Anne Marie. We expect that President Biden will address this grim milestone, 1 million U.S. deaths, this morning in a pre-recorded speech. He's also ordered federal buildings to lower their flags to half staff to honor those million deaths. Meanwhile, White House officials are already warning of another deadly wave that could infect 100 million people, perhaps this fall and winter, a new Omicron variant that is already circulating in this country. The president has been pleading with Congress to pass another $10 billion in COVID funding. He's saying even that may not be enough to make sure that the U.S. can purchase enough COVID vaccines and tests and antiviral treatments to be ready for the fall. But Republicans are balking. They say they won't vote for it unless they also get a vote on keeping this Trump-era pandemic policy known as Title 42 that blocks migrants at the border from seeking asylum due to COVID concerns in place. So there's an impasse right now. President Biden, as you know, came into office wanting to get this pandemic under control. At one point, he even predicted that we were going to experience independence from the virus. And the COVID-19 death rate was actually on the decline last summer. Take a look at this trend line. But then we saw these spikes from the highly contagious Delta and Omicron variants. We're now back down to about 500 cases a day or so from a peak of roughly 5,000. Today, President Biden is set to co-host the annual COVID Vaccine Summit. It is a global summit. It's going to be a virtual summit. It's meant to send a message to leaders around the world to invest more in COVID-19 vaccines and treatments because, as we know, Anne Marie, COVID anywhere is a threat to lives everywhere.
Indeed. Great point, Nancy. Thank you very much. Devastating battles have escalated in eastern Ukraine today as Ukrainian soldiers try to regain ground and push back Russian troops from the city of Kharkiv. Meanwhile, the mayor of Mariupol says evacuation routes for civilians have been cut off. For more, now we want to bring in Deborah Pata. She's following the latest in Ukraine's capital city of Kyiv. Deborah, thank you so much for joining us. You spoke to a woman whose husband is a soldier and is stuck underneath that steel plant in Mariupol. We saw some devastating, heartbreaking photos of the men that are in there, the doctors that are doing whatever they can to save people's lives. What did that woman tell you about just what the conditions are like there now?
Morning, Anne-Marie. Well, indeed, those images are absolutely haunting. And we spoke to the wife of one of those soldiers called Andre. She said that she manages to speak to her husband about once a week, and she can hear as the weeks go by, while his spirits are high and they resolve, they are not going to surrender to Russian forces, and they are the only thing standing in the way of Russia taking complete control of Mariupol. While they won't surrender, of course, it's been a long time now, well over 2 months, and she says that week by week she can hear that, that there's a little bit of anxiety and stress that sometimes creeps into his voice. Certainly the conditions there are shocking. They are underground. They've been there for a very long time. The biggest problem is that they are running out of food. They're close to starving. She said that some men, have one tiny little can of fish that they have to share between 5 grown men. But the other problem is clean drinking water. That remains perhaps the biggest crisis right now. So time is definitely running out for those men. There are also hundreds of them who are injured. Some of them not so badly, they can still fight, but others have lost limbs. As we saw in those terrible photographs, they have lost an arm, they have lost a leg, and the medical doctors, the military doctors who are there are having to perform operations without proper medical supplies, without proper sanitation. So as you can see, it is a dire situation. And this young woman and the other women, the loved ones of these men, are appealing to the world to intervene before it is too late.
Yeah, I think dire doesn't even sort of begin to describe what you say is going on there. Deborah, thank you very much. Well, as the country deals with high inflation and rising prices, food banks are facing growing lines of people desperately searching for help. U.S. consumer prices rose an annual 8.3% in April, with the cost of food jumping another 9%. And as prices skyrocket across the country, global issues are sparking concerns of what the food supply could look like this fall. So Libby Campbell is the chief executive officer of the West Texas Food Bank in Midland, Texas, the city with the highest inflation in the U.S., and she joins us now to discuss. I'm really glad that you are here. We remember the beginning of the pandemic when we saw those incredible long lines at food banks across the country, and many people thought, what's happening to our country? We've never seen anything like this before. And now we're starting to see lines at food banks again. How has the number of people sort of seeking assistance changed over, say, the last year? Because there were these big lineups at the beginning of the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, and then it seemed like things got much, much better, and now it seems like they're getting worse.
You're exactly right. That's exactly what we're seeing in food banks across the country right now, is the fact that really during last summer, we did start seeing kind of a decrease. We saw a little bit when Omicron and Delta was happening. But once, people started getting child credit checks, those started to help see our lines decrease, to help deal with the cost of inflation immediately. When those checks really stopped in January, what we started to see was actually an increase in our lines. Peak during pandemic numbers for us was 1.4 million pounds of food distributed to the 19 counties that we serve in West Texas. We are a small rural food bank. So if you think of some larger urban food banks, we won't have those kinds of numbers, but we got back down to maybe distributing 700,000 or 800,000 pounds a month. We are back up over 1 million pounds now. Most of the people in our lines currently have jobs, or they're elderly who are having to take on raising their grandchildren because parents can't afford daycare or they can't find daycare resources right now. So that it's forcing them to have to come to the food bank to help make ends meet. But the inflation out here, sadly, I'm not happy that we claim the 10% of the highest, inflation in the country. But, we are trying to do the best we can with providing commodities to our community out here.
When I was thinking about sort of all the factors that are leading to people heading to the food banks, there's domestic issue. There are domestic issues, but then many of those domestic issues are linked to global issues. The war in Ukraine is one. Of course, there's climate change and the drought that many farmers are facing. There are issues with the border and getting trucks across the border. I wonder, in your time at the food bank, have you seen a scenario like this before, where there are all these sort of national and international factors that are contributing to people coming to your doorstep?
No, never. I mean, we lost over 100,000 pounds of produce last month to the fact that we had to double check, produce at the border. We are a border community food bank. Also, we go all the way down to the border between Mexico and Texas. So we lost over 100,000 pounds of produce. We have a problem that we're worried about with fertilizer. We know that farmers are fertilizing probably on average 40% less than they have in the past due to the cost of fertilizer and what has been going on with what has been going on in Ukraine and Russia. So that is obviously a concern. And that's not something we're really seeing right now. It's something that we'll probably see later on in the fall when people start to harvest what crops have been grown. The other thing that's kind of, nerve-wracking, to be quite honest, is the fact that we have a global climate situation. We know right now that we usually already are starting to get watermelons that we're able to hand out to our neighbors in which we serve in the 19 counties of West Texas. But we know from our watermelon guys that we're actually not going to be able to get those watermelons really until July. So we're already starting to see concerns as far as produce and certain commodities, and also the increase with inflation. People have jobs and they need help. And, we are feeling the pinch just like any other home where we're purchasing food or trying to find resources for our neighbors that we're serving. It's difficult out there right now. And in the over 10, 12 years that I've been in the food banking industry, I don't think I've ever seen the amount of problems and concerns that we have. And it's almost like, I hate to use a food reference, but it's like peeling, it's definitely like peeling an onion, trying to figure out what we can do to deal with the problems that we're seeing.
I think it's actually a really good sort of metaphor. It is, because all of these factors are things that are not going to end on Friday or next month. I mean, these are long-term issues that, in a way, almost is, for some of them, the federal government can do things, but in many other cases, it can't. Nothing will be able to sort of solve the problem domestically anyways. And a reminder that we are also interconnected, that you see something happen, halfway around the globe, and you think it's not going to have an impact on you or your neighbor, and it very well might. Libby, thank you so much for your time. We could talk a lot longer about this, and thank you for the good work that you are doing.
No, thank you so much. So good luck to you too.
So, of course, we're talking about inflation. Inflation is impacting all aspects of life, especially at grocery stores, as we've been saying, gas stations, and even our own personal savings accounts. So coming up, we're going to take a closer look at what's driving all of this. But first, of course, at 7:42 on the East Coast, here's a check of your local weather.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It's gonna be big!
The metaverse, the virtual world that's become a cryptocurrency casino.
It's like buying property on Mars. Do they get an actual picture of this? No, it's a digital copy. Why would they pay for that?
Making millionaires almost overnight.
We made more than $1 million in crypto last year.
I have no idea how much money I have made over the past year. That's like, wow!
Big rewards.
There's gold in them, they're hills, as they say.
Bigger risks.
The market's down, but it's gonna bounce back. It's crypto.
Is it a gold rush or fool's gold?
It's our metaverse, our story. Peace out, y'all.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Stream now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
This week on 60 Minutes, that's incredible.
The 60 Minutes.
60 Minutes, 60 Minutes.
Are you ready for some tough questions?
Let me ask you this.
You know how this sounds.
What's your response to that?
60 Minutes Sundays on CBS.
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
Let's get the forecast from our partners at the Weather Channel.
Here we are in our virtual view.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battering rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
This is our virtual view, what it actually looks like.
Those are some of the best graphics I've seen.
Spare no expense, Gail.
We experience the weather in a whole new way.
Go to the ends of the earth
Right now.
We got something crazy.
and reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative,
Da-da-da-da.
and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Well, the time now is 7:45, and this is a live look at New York's Times Square, home of CBS Mornings. Gail King is standing by with a preview of the show. Gail, good morning.
Good morning to you, Anne Marie. Ahead on CBS Mornings as we mark a major milestone in this pandemic, David Begnaud has a powerful story about the families forever changed by the virus. He checks back in on people we've covered to see how they're doing now, and their stories we hope will inspire you. And it's a day that the NFL fans have been waiting for. It's the release of the 2022 schedule. Nate's going to take you behind the scenes to see how the NFL narrows down the matchups from trillions of possibilities, trillions with a T. And if you're having a bad hair day, we have one guest who says she can help you out. That's the CEO of Rizzo's Curls. That's Julissa Prado. Joins us in the studio to talk about her line of hair products and how to find your natural hair type. Can be done. We'll see you at 8 o'clock. And Anne Marie Green, it's good to be with you.
Good to be with you, too. I could have her over here because I feel like I need a little work on the hair. Thank you. See you at 8. At the end of 2021, the personal savings rate dropped to its lowest level since 2013, less than 7%. This followed what was widely seen as a savings boom during the pandemic. So for more on this, we want to bring in Fiona Gregg, Managing Director and a co-president at the J.P. Morgan Chase Institute. Thanks for joining us. Good morning. I remember doing stories during the pandemic about how people were taking the money they were getting from the government and paying down their credit card debt. And it was, really great for a lot of people. But at the same time, we were doing stories about people lining up at food banks. Explain these numbers to us. Are we talking about sort of a tale of two nations within one nation, that some people really benefited during the pandemic and for other people, they used up all their savings?
Yeah, good morning, Anne Marie. I think this is a great question. And in some ways, this is in part about who benefited and who didn't. But in some ways, I want to take one step back and describe to you what we saw. During the pandemic, we started measuring just cash balances, right? So much was going on with income and with spending, and cash balances were in some ways a way to summarize everything up in one number. And what we saw as of the end of 2021, families had more cash on hand than 2 years prior, to the tune of 65% more for low-income families, 35% more for high-income families. And, that's not a ton of money for low-income families. That meant they had about $1,300 in their checking account. So this is money that can last a couple of weeks, not necessarily many, many months, but it will give them a feeling that they have more breathing room in their financial life. Now, with the savings rate dropping, I think it's helpful to think about this like a bathtub, right? There's $1,300 worth of money in the bathtub, and then the savings rate is sort of how much money is coming in, water flowing in, how much money is coming out. And if we have a savings rate of, say, 5%, that means for every $100 coming in, only 5% are left. Only $5 are left after our spending. So in some sense, this tells us that the balances that we see in the bathtub, they may not yet be falling. It's just that the savings rate, the pressure on that income has increased.
So some people are going to hear this headline and say, how is this new? There are always people living paycheck to paycheck. Of course, low-income families have less savings. So can you talk to me about the broader impact? We've been talking all day long about the impact of inflation. It's difficult to buy food. What does it mean when you see the savings rate slow down? And the impact that it has beyond, just one family's economy, the broader economy.
100%. So with inflation around 8.3%, that means that for every dollar that comes in my house in the form of an income, I have to spend that on the things I need to live, right? And the prices that I am paying at the supermarket, at the gas pump, anywhere have gone up. And so that means that a larger share of my paycheck is being spent for the same quantity of goods and services that I bought last month. So that can definitely put more pressure on that income and leave less at the end of the month to save. Other things I think are playing a role here, Anne-Marie. Obviously, during the pandemic, there was so much government support, whether it was the 3 rounds of stimulus, the advanced CTC payments, expanded unemployment insurance, debt forbearance of a number of forms. All of that was either putting cash directly in the hands of families or relieving them of debt payments that they had to make. And all of that accumulated over the course of 2021. So I do think that families have a little bit more of a buffer coming into 2022. But now the picture looks a bit different, right? Those child tax credits have paused or stopped. We still have student loan debt forbearance. That's important. But we're not going to wait for another round of stimulus. That's definitely not going to happen. And finally, one other thing that's notable is that, we see big seasonal patterns in this. And a lot of us just filed our tax returns. We just finished, end of year bonus season goes all the way through March 15th. So what we see just from a month-to-month picture is that this time of year, March, April, May, tends to be the time of the year when actually families can feel most flush with cash. And it's a good moment to think about, can I store away some of that money for a rainy day that might come later in the year?
That is good advice. The tendency is to, buy something nice for yourself because maybe you've been, sacrificing all this time, but save. Fiona, Greg, thank you so much.
Great to be with you.
So we're going to take a quick break, which means we have a lot to get to first, but we're going to leave you with some late night laughs from our friend James Corden. You need a reason to laugh, right? He shares news that after nearly 22 years run, Apple is going to discontinue production of the iPod.
I hope Apple can recover from this. For any young people watching, an iPod is basically like a phone that can't phone anyone. It only plays music, but you have to buy that music first, okay? Or you can use Napster, but not the Napster they got now. It's a different Napster that was illegal because it was stolen. It's basically free Spotify. So I can't believe how hard it is to describe an iPod. But now that it's fully discontinued, that means we're about 3 years away from Gen Z hipsters only listening to music on iPods.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It's gonna be big!
The metaverse, the virtual world that's become a cryptocurrency casino.
It's like buying property on Mars. Do they get an actual picture of this? No, it's a digital copy. Why would they pay for that?
Making millionaires almost overnight.
We made more than $1 million in crypto last year.
I have no idea how much money I have made over the past year. That's like, wow.
Big rewards.
There's gold in them, there hills, as they say.
Bigger risks.
The market's down, but it's going to bounce back. It's crypto.
Is it a gold rush or fool's gold?
It's our metaverse, our story. Peace out, y'all.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Stream now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
This week on 60 Minutes, that.
That's incredible.
The 60 Minutes.
60 Minutes. 60 Minutes.
Are you ready for some tough questions?
Let me ask you this.
You know how this sounds.
What's your response to that?
60 Minutes Sundays on CBS.
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
Let's get the forecast from our partners at the Weather Channel. Here we are in our virtual view.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battering rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
This is our virtual view, what it actually looks like.
Those are some of the best graphics I've seen.
Spare no expense, Gail.
We experience the weather in a whole new way.
Go to the ends of the earth
Right now.
We got something crazy.
and reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait,
There's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
It is 7:56. Here's a look at what's coming up today. President Biden will deliver pre-recorded remarks later this morning, kicking off a global COVID summit. He's expected to urge world leaders to invest more money in vaccines and testing as the White House marks 1 million COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. And we are keeping a close eye on another major summit happening at the White House today. The president will welcome leaders from Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia, as well as other countries across Southeast Asia, to Washington for talks and a special dinner that is set for 6 p.m. Eastern. Plus, top diplomats from the G7 countries are discussing the Ukraine war response in Germany today. They're holding meetings over the next few days to address the coordinated response to Russia's invasion. Leaders from Ukraine and neighboring Moldova were also invited. And coming up in our 9 o'clock hour, we're going to talk to former FDA Associate Commissioner Peter Pitts about the baby formula shortage that is gripping the country. You can stream that at around 9:40 Eastern. If you are heading out the door, take us with you. You can access all of our CBS News national and local streams for free anytime, anywhere on the CBS News app. CBS Mornings is next, and I will see you in an hour.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It's gonna be big!
The metaverse, the virtual world that's become a cryptocurrency casino.
It's like buying property on Mars. Do they get an actual picture of this? No, it's a digital copy. Why would they pay for that?
Making millionaires almost overnight.
We made more than $1 million in crypto last year.
I have no idea how much money I have made over the past year. That's like, wow.
Big rewards.
There's gold in them, there hills, as they say.
Bigger risks.
The market's down, but it's going to bounce back. It's crypto.
Is it a gold rush or fool's gold?
It's our metaverse, our story. Peace out, y'all.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Stream now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
This week on 60 Minutes, that.
That's incredible.
The 60 minutes.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
Are you ready for some tough questions?
Let me ask you this.
You know how this sounds.
What's your